For 15 years, Michael Jordan kept a secret. Not even his teammates knew. Not his coaches. Not the millions of fans who thought they knew everything about the basketball legend. Until one night, when a famous pianist decided to mock him in front of everyone. That was the pianist's mistake. What happened next would shock the world and reveal a promise Jordan made long ago to the only person who knew his true gift. Michael Jordan tugged at his bow tie as he stepped out of the black limousine. The Chicago night air felt cool against his face. In front of him stood the gleaming Grand Plaza Hotel, its windows glowing like 1,000 stars. "You ready for this, Mr. Jordan?" asked the driver. "As ready as I'll ever be," Michael replied with his famous smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Tonight, he wasn't nervous about being around famous people. That was normal for him. But this charity event for Chicago's Youth Basketball Foundation was different. Tonight was all about music, not basketball. The fancy invitation had mentioned classical pianists, opera singers, and other musical talents Michael knew nothing about. Still, it was for the kids who couldn't afford basketball programs. That's why he was here. Inside the hotel's massive ballroom, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks. Men in tuxedos and women in sparkling dresses moved around holding champagne glasses. A beautiful grand piano sat on the stage, shiny and black as midnight. Michael Jordan. Over. "Here!" called a woman with silver hair piled high on her head. She hurried toward him, hand outstretched. "I'm Deborah Winters, the event organizer. We're so thrilled you could make it." Before Michael could answer, 3 people rushed up asking for autographs. He signed quickly, used to the attention. "Sorry about that," he said to Deborah. "Nice to meet you." "Not at all. Your presence here tonight will help us raise twice as much money." She lowered her voice. "Though I should warn you about tonight's main performer, Victor Romanov." "The pianist? What about him?" Deborah's smile tightened. "He's brilliant, but difficult. He has strong opinions and isn't shy about sharing them." Michael laughed. "I've dealt with Dennis Rodman. I think I can handle a pianist." Just then, a hush fell over the room. A man entered through the main doors. He wasn't tall, maybe 5'8", but he walked like he was 7 feet. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, and his eyes, dark as coal, scanned the room as if judging everyone inside it. "That's him," whispered Deborah. "Victor Romanov." People moved aside to create a path for Victor. Some tried to greet him, but he barely nodded in return. When his eyes landed on Michael, something flashed across his face. Recognition, followed by what looked like disgust. Deborah waved Victor over. For a moment, Michael thought he might ignore her, but Victor changed direction and approached. "Them! Victor! Wonderful to see you," Deborah gushed. "May I introduce Michael Jordan? He's our special guest tonight." Victor's handshake was quick and limp. "The basketball player. How athletic." His Russian accent made the words sound even colder. Michael kept his smile in place. "I'm a big supporter of youth programs. Your playing is world famous, Mr. Romanov." "Yes, it is." Victor looked around the room. "Is there somewhere quiet I can wait until it's time? I need to prepare mentally." Without waiting for an answer, he walked away, leaving Michael and Deborah standing there. "Told you," Deborah said. "Difficult." Michael shrugged. "No big deal." But something about the way Victor had dismissed him bothered Michael more than he wanted to admit. He'd met snobs before, but this felt personal somehow. A waiter offered Michael a drink, which he accepted gratefully. As he sipped, he watched the crowd. These weren't his usual sports fans or business associates. They were music people, conductors, composers, and rich donors who supported the arts. Michael felt like he was playing an away game without his team. A soft bell rang, and Deborah stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin shortly. Michael found himself at a front table with some city officials and their wives. They were polite, but kept their conversation to topics he knew little about: Mozart, Chopin, and someone named Rachmaninoff. Deborah tapped the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our annual Musical Stars charity event. Tonight's proceeds will support the Chicago Youth Basketball Foundation, providing opportunities for underprivileged children to learn teamwork and discipline through sports." The crowd applauded politely. Michael nodded in thanks when Deborah gestured toward him. "We are honored to have with us the legendary Michael Jordan, who has generously donated both his time and resources to this cause." More applause, louder this time. Our main event tonight is a performance by the incomparable Victor Romanov, one of the world's greatest pianists. The audience clapped enthusiastically. And after Victor's performance, we have a special surprise guest who will also play for us tonight. Michael raised his eyebrows, curious. He hadn't heard about another performer. But first, please welcome to the stage Victor Romanov. The crowd erupted in applause as Victor walked to the piano. He sat down, adjusted the bench, and placed his hands above the keys. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they were filled with intense focus. Michael leaned forward in his seat. For all Victor's rudeness, he was curious to hear what made the man so famous. Victor's fingers hovered over the keys for one breathless moment. Then, he began to play. The first notes floated through the air like wisps of smoke. Michael Jordan had heard classical music before, but never like this. Victor's fingers danced across the keys, sometimes gentle as falling snow, other times powerful as thunder. The music seemed to tell a story without words: sadness, joy, and something that felt like anger. Michael found himself holding his breath. He might not know much about classical music, but he knew talent when he saw it. And Victor Romanov was talented. Very talented. For 15 minutes, Victor played without stopping. The crowd sat frozen, afraid that even the smallest movement might break the spell. When the final notes faded away, there was a moment of silence before the room exploded into applause. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering. "Bravo! Bravo!" someone shouted. Victor stood and bowed deeply, his face serious. He bowed 3 more times before raising his hands for quiet. "Thank you," he said into the microphone, his accent thicker now, as if the music had brought out more of his Russian roots. "That was Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1, a piece that speaks to the soul." The audience murmured in agreement. Victor wiped his forehead with a white handkerchief, then continued speaking. "Music is the highest form of human expression," he said. "It requires not just practice, but a special gift, a sensitivity that few possess." People nodded, hanging on his every word. Michael clapped politely, impressed despite the man's attitude. "Many think physical activities, sports, are equal to music," Victor continued, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "They are not." An uncomfortable feeling crept up Michael's spine. Take basketball, for example. Victor's eyes moved to Michael's table. Running back and forth, throwing a ball through a hoop. Any tall person with good coordination can learn this. The room went so quiet. Michael could hear ice clinking in someone's glass across the room. Was Victor really saying what Michael thought he was saying? But music. Victor placed his hand over his heart. Music comes from here. It takes intelligence, emotion, culture, things you cannot learn just by being tall. Now everyone knew Victor was talking about Michael. Some people shifted in their seats, looking down at their plates. Others stared with wide eyes, shocked by the pianist's rudeness. Michael felt his face grow hot. Not from embarrassment. He'd been insulted by better trash talkers than Viktor Romanov, but from anger. This man knew nothing about basketball, about the thousands of hours Michael had spent practicing, about the intelligence and creativity the game required. "We have a famous basketball player with us tonight," Victor said, pointing directly at Michael now. "And while I'm sure he is very good at jumping and dunking, I wonder if he understands the difference between throwing balls and creating art." Deborah Winters rushed to the stage, her face pale. "Thank you, Victor, for that wonderful performance and, those thoughts." She tried to guide him away from the microphone, but Victor wasn't finished. "Perhaps Mr. Jordan would like to try playing the piano," Victor suggested, with a mean smile, "to show us what those basketball hands can do on a keyboard." The silence in the room was painful now. Some people looked at Michael with pity, others with embarrassment. A few wealthy older men chuckled quietly, apparently enjoying the mockery. Michael sat very still. He could feel everyone waiting for his reaction. Would he get angry? Walk out? Make a scene? But Michael Jordan hadn't become a champion by losing. His cool when opponents tried to get under his skin. He looked Victor straight in the eyes and did the last thing anyone expected. He smiled. Not his usual camera-ready smile, but a small, almost mysterious one that made Victor blink in surprise. "Thank you for your perspective," Michael said calmly, his voice carrying across the quiet room. "I'm looking forward to tonight's surprise performer." Deborah jumped on this chance to change the subject. "Yes, our surprise guest. Let's take a short break, and we'll continue with the program in 15 minutes. People started talking all at once, mostly in whispers. Michael could imagine what they were saying. How rude. Poor Michael Jordan. Someone should say something to Victor. A young waiter refilled Michael's water glass, whispering, "Don't listen to him, Mr. Jordan. My dad says you're the smartest player who ever lived." Michael nodded thanks, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about something from long ago, something no one in this room knew about him. A gray-haired man in an expensive suit stopped by Michael's table. "Disgraceful behavior. I'm sorry you had to endure that, Mr. Jordan." Others came by, with similar comments. Michael thanked them all politely, but inside, a plan was forming. Across the room, Victor was surrounded by admirers who seemed to have forgotten or forgiven his rudeness in the face of his musical genius. He laughed loudly at something someone said, then glanced at Michael with a smug expression. Michael excused himself from the table. Instead of heading to the restroom or the exit as people might expect, he walked directly to Deborah Winters. "Ms. Winters," he said quietly, "about that surprise performer tonight." Deborah looked worried. "Michael, I'm so sorry about what happened. We can cancel the rest of the program if you'd prefer to leave." Michael shook his head. "Actually, I have a better idea." He leaned closer and whispered something in her ear. Deborah's eyes widened in shock. "Are you serious?" she gasped. "You can really?" Michael nodded. "But I'll need about 10 minutes to get ready." For the first time that evening, Deborah's professional smile became genuine. "Of course. Take all the time you need." As Michael walked toward the exit, he pulled out his cell phone and dialed a number. "Tyrell, it's MJ. Remember that conversation we had last month?" Well, tonight's the night. I need your help with something. Michael stepped into a quiet corner of the hotel lobby, away from curious ears. As he explained what he needed to his friend who worked at the hotel, his mind drifted back in time. He wasn't in a fancy Chicago hotel anymore. He was a skinny 10-year-old boy in North Carolina, walking up the creaky steps to his Grandma Eliza's porch. It had been a tough day at school. Some older boys had teased him about being too tall and skinny, calling him Stick Man, and laughing when he missed a shot during playground basketball. Back then, Michael wasn't the best player, not even close. "What's wrong, little man?" Grandma Eliza had asked as soon as he walked through her door. She always seemed to know when something was bothering him. "Nothing," Michael had mumbled. But then the whole story came pouring out. Grandma Eliza had listened, nodding. Then she'd done something unexpected. Instead of giving him a lecture or telling him to ignore the bullies, she had taken his hand and led him to the old upright piano in her living room. The piano had belonged to his grandpa, who had died before Michael was born. It was the one thing in Grandma Eliza's house that no one was allowed to touch. "Sit," she had said, patting the bench. Michael had looked at her, confused. "I don't know how to play." "Not yet." Grandma Eliza's eyes had twinkled. "But you will." She had sat beside him and placed her wrinkled hands on the keys. "Music heals the heart, Michael. When words fail you, music speaks." And then she had played. Her fingers, bent with arthritis, had somehow straightened as they danced across the keys. The music had filled the small house, making it seem bigger somehow, more magical. When she finished, Michael had stared at her in wonder. "Could I ever play like that?" "With practice and heart, you can do anything," she had answered. "Let me show you." That day had been the first of many lessons. Every Saturday for years, Michael would visit Grandma Eliza, and she would teach him to play. First simple tunes, then more complex pieces. "You have a gift, Michael," she told him one day when he was 13. "Your hands might be made for basketball, but your heart speaks through music." Michael never told his friends about the lessons. At school, he was becoming known for basketball, his skills improving every day. The piano was something private, something just for him and Grandma Eliza. "Why don't you play for others?" he'd asked her once. Grandma Eliza had smiled. "I used to long ago. I even played in churches and small concerts. But now, I play for love, not for applause." Sometimes the most special talents are the ones we keep for ourselves, and those close to our hearts. Michael had taken those words to heart. As his basketball career took off in high school, then college, and finally the NBA, he kept playing the piano. He'd bought one for his first apartment and practiced late at night when no one was around to hear. When Grandma Eliza died during his rookie year with the Chicago Bulls, Michael had been devastated. At her small funeral, he'd noticed sheets of music among her personal items. She was writing a piece, her neighbor had told him, said it was for you, but she never finished it. Michael had taken the incomplete composition home. On the bottom of the last page, Grandma Eliza had written, "For Michael, finish our song one day." And so he had tried, year after year, working on the piece in private moments between games, championships, and commercial shoots. Music became his escape from the pressures of fame, a place where he wasn't Michael Jordan, basketball superstar, but just Michael, Grandma Eliza's grandson. No coach knew. No teammate knew. Not even his closest friends knew that Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player in the world, could play the piano like he'd been born to it. For 15 years, through 6 championships and countless achievements, Michael had kept his promise to practice. He'd hired teachers under strict confidentiality agreements. He'd played in empty hotel ballrooms on road trips, wearing headphones connected to electronic keyboards so no one would hear. "Sir? Mr. Jordan?" Michael blinked, pulled back to the present. The hotel manager stood before him, looking concerned. "Sorry," Michael said. "I was just thinking about something. Is Tyrell here?" "Yes, sir. He's bringing what you requested to the service entrance near the ballroom." Michael checked his watch. 10 minutes had passed since he'd left the charity event. "Thank you," he said, starting to walk away. "Mr. Jordan?" the manager called after him. "If you don't mind me asking, what exactly are you planning to do?" Michael smiled. "Something my grandma would have wanted." He made his way through the hotel's back hallways, where staff hurried about with trays of food and drinks. At the service entrance, Tyrell waited with a small duffel bag. "Here you go, MJ," Tyrell said, handing over the bag. "You sure about this? I've never heard you play." "No one has," Michael answered. "Not in a long time." Inside the bag was a pair of soft leather gloves, custom-made to fit Michael's large hands. He'd worn similar ones while practicing for years to protect both his fingers and his secret. "Thanks, Tyrell. I owe you one." "Nah, man. After all you've done for my family, we're still in your debt." Tyrell hesitated. "But MJ? Show that stuck-up pianist what Chicago's all about." Michael grinned. "That's the plan." He slipped into a small office near the ballroom to prepare. As he put on the gloves and flexed his fingers, he could almost hear Grandma Eliza's voice. "Play from your heart, Michael. That's where true music lives." In the ballroom, he could hear Deborah announcing the break was almost over. Soon, she would introduce the surprise guest performer. Michael took a deep breath and removed the gloves, tucking them into his pocket. Then he straightened his bow tie and walked toward the ballroom doors. It was time to shock the world again, but this time, not with a basketball. Michael Jordan paused at the ballroom doors, his hand resting on the handle. Through the crack, he could see Victor Romanov holding court at a table of admirers. Victor laughed loudly, probably telling some story about his musical greatness. For a moment, doubt crept into Michael's mind. What if he failed? What if he couldn't play well under pressure? Basketball was one thing. He'd proven himself there thousands of times. But this was different. This was Grandma Eliza's world, not his. "You going back in, Mr. Jordan?" asked a young server passing by with a tray of desserts. "Just gathering my thoughts," Michael replied. The server nodded sympathetically. "That pianist was way out of line. My boss says you should sue him for what he said." Michael chuckled. "I've got a better idea." With newfound determination, he pushed through the doors and walked straight to Deborah Winters, who was checking her notes at the side of the stage. "Michael, there you are," she said. "I was getting worried. Are you ready?" He nodded. "But I need one more favor." "Anything. Don't introduce me by name. Just say, 'Our surprise guest,' and let me walk out." Deborah raised an eyebrow. "Creating suspense? I like it." "And one more thing," Michael added. "Is there a specific piece you'd like me to play first?" Deborah looked surprised. "You're asking me to choose?" "Consider it a thank you for letting me do this," she thought for a moment. "My mother loved Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. Do you know it?" Michael smiled. "It was my grandmother's favorite too." As Deborah moved toward the stage, Michael took a seat at an empty table near the back. He wanted to watch everyone's reactions, especially Victor's. Deborah tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now continue with our program. Before we do, I want to thank you all for your generous donations tonight. We've already raised over $200,000 for Chicago's Youth Basketball Foundation. The crowd applauded enthusiastically. And now, Deborah continued, as promised, we have a special surprise performance. Please welcome our mystery guest to the stage. People looked around, confused. No one walked toward the stage. Viktor Romanov smirked, whispering something to the woman beside him. Michael stood up slowly. As he moved through the tables toward the stage, whispers spread like wildfire. Is that Jordan? What's he doing? He's not actually going to play, is he? Victor's face showed his disbelief. As Michael passed his table, Victor called out, "Basketball players should stick to what they know, Mr. Jordan." A few people gasped at his rudeness. Michael just smiled and kept walking. The grand piano waited on stage, its lid raised like a black wing. Michael adjusted the bench and sat down, his tall frame looking somewhat awkward in this setting. The bright lights felt familiar. He'd performed under lights his whole career, just not like this. The audience was silent, a mix of curiosity and second-hand embarrassment on their faces. They clearly expected this to be some kind of joke or, at best, a simple tune played with one finger. Victor leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a mocking smile on his face. Michael placed his hands on the keys. They looked strange there, larger than most pianists' hands, with long fingers that had gripped basketballs, not piano keys, in front of audiences. He closed his eyes for a moment, remembering Grandma Eliza sitting beside him on her old piano. Bench. When you play, Michael, forget about everything else. Just feel the music. When he opened his eyes, Michael was no longer nervous. This wasn't about proving Victor wrong. It wasn't even about impressing anyone. This was about honoring his grandmother and the gift she had given him. He began to play. The first soft, haunting notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata. The reaction was immediate. Victor sat up straight, his smug expression replaced by confusion. Others around the room exchanged glances of surprise. Deborah Winters, standing at the side of the stage, covered her mouth with her hand. Michael played on, his fingers moving with a grace that seemed impossible for hands so large and powerful. The piece grew beneath his touch, each note clear and perfect. In the audience, a woman closed her eyes, moved by the beauty of the music. An older man leaned forward, squinting as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Viktor Romanov's face had gone pale. He reached for his water glass with a slightly trembling hand. As Michael continued playing, memories of Grandma Eliza flooded his mind. Her patient teaching, her gentle corrections, her proud smile when he mastered a difficult passage. In a strange way, it felt like she was there with him, guiding his hands as they moved across the keys. The piece was nearing its end. Michael had a decision to make. He could stop after this one song. He'd already made his point. Victor and everyone else knew now that he could play, and play well. But something inside him wanted more. For 15 years, he'd kept this talent hidden, playing only for himself. Now that his secret was out, why not show them everything he could do? The final notes of the Moonlight Sonata faded away. The room remained absolutely silent. Then, before anyone could react, Michael moved seamlessly into another piece, something more challenging, more impressive. His decision was made. Tonight, Michael Jordan would hold nothing back. The last notes of the Moonlight Sonata hung in the air for a heartbeat before Michael launched into Chopin's Fantaisie Impromptu. His fingers flew across the keys at a speed that made several people gasp. The rapid notes cascaded like water, filling the ballroom with a storm of sound. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even reached for their phones to record the moment. They were too stunned by what they were witnessing. In the middle of the room, Viktor Romanov sat frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. The world-famous pianist kept blinking, as if trying to wake himself from a dream. This couldn't be happening. The basketball player couldn't possibly play like this. But Michael Jordan was playing. His large hands, which had palmed basketballs, with ease, now stretched across octaves that smaller pianists struggled to reach. Years of secret practice guided every movement, every touch of the keys. Deborah Winters stood at the side of the stage, tears streaming down her face. She'd expected Michael to play something simple, maybe a short piece he'd learned for the occasion. Not this. Not a performance worthy of any concert hall in the world. As Michael played, something changed in the room. The initial shock gave way to pure appreciation. Heads nodded in time with the music. Smiles appeared on faces. An elderly woman in the front row closed her eyes, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. The piece ended with a flourish, and this time the silence lasted only a second before the room erupted in wild applause. People jumped to their feet, clapping and cheering louder than they had for Viktor. "Bravo! Incredible! More!" Michael smiled and nodded in thanks, but he didn't stand. Instead, he placed his hands on the keys again and began a gentler piece, a Debussy composition that flowed like a dream. In the audience, a music critic from the Chicago Tribune frantically scribbled notes. A famous violinist leaned toward her, husband, and whispered, "His technique is impeccable. How is this possible?" Viktor finally moved, reaching for his glass of wine and draining it in one gulp. His face had gone from pale to red. His eyes narrowed as he watched Michael play. Their tihi, gentle piece came to an end, and again the audience applauded wildly. This time, Michael stood and bowed slightly. The crowd roared even louder, giving him a standing ovation that seemed like it might never end. Deborah rushed onto the stage with a microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice shaking. With emotion, "Michael Jordan!" The applause grew even louder, if that was possible. People whistled and stamped their feet. Michael took the microphone. "Thank you," he said simply. "Music has been a private joy for most of my life. Tonight is the first time I've played for an audience since I was a teenager." This revelation brought another wave of applause and surprised murmurs. "My grandmother taught me to play when I was 10 years old," Michael continued. "She believed music could speak when words failed." She was right. In the back of the room, a door opened and several reporters slipped in, alerted by texts and calls from guests. Camera flashes began popping around the edges of the ballroom. "I'd like to play one more piece," Michael said. "Not a classical one this time. Something I wrote myself." The audience settled down immediately, eager to hear more. Even Viktor leaned forward, his earlier anger now mixed with reluctant curiosity. Michael returned to the piano and began to play a melody unlike anything they'd heard before. It had elements of classical music, but also hints of jazz and soul. It was both complex and accessible, technical and emotional. It was the piece Grandma Eliza had started writing for him, the one he'd spent 15 years finishing. Every note told part of their story. Her teaching, his learning, their shared love of music. Michael had never played it for anyone else. It had always been too personal, too close to his heart. But tonight, it flowed from his fingers as naturally as breathing. He played with his eyes closed, lost in memories of Grandma Eliza's small living room, her patient smile, her gentle hands guiding his. When he reached the part where her composition ended and his began, Michael felt a warmth spread through him. It was as if she were there, nodding in approval at how he'd completed their song. As the final notes faded away, Michael opened his eyes to see something he hadn't expected. Some people in the audience were crying. Others sat with expressions of wonder on their faces. Even Viktor Romanov seemed moved, though he quickly tried to hide it. For a long moment, no one made a sound. Then, like a wave, the applause began again, building to a thunderous roar that shook the crystal chandeliers. Michael stood and bowed one last time. As he looked out at the astonished faces, he couldn't help but smile. Once again, Michael Jordan had left the world speechless, but this time without a basketball in sight. As the applause finally began to die down, Deborah rushed back onto the stage, her mascara slightly smudged from tears. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice trembling with emotion, "I think we've just witnessed something truly historical. Michael Jordan, thank you for sharing your incredible gift with us tonight." The audience erupted in applause once more. Michael nodded humbly and started to leave the stage, but Deborah placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Would you mind answering a few questions?" she asked. "I think everyone is dying to know more." Michael hesitated. He hadn't planned on talking about his music. It had always been his private sanctuary, something he did for himself, not for public consumption. But looking at the faces in the crowd, genuinely moved, not just starstruck, he found himself nodding. "Sure," he said. "A few questions." A forest of hands shot up immediately. Deborah pointed to an older woman in a blue dress near the front. "When did you learn to play like that?" the woman asked, still looking stunned. "I started when I was 10, Michael answered. "My grandmother was my first teacher. After she passed away, I hired instructors who could keep a secret." This brought chuckles from the audience. A music professor from Northwestern University stood next. "Your technique is remarkable, especially for someone with such large hands. How did you overcome the challenges that must have presented?" Michael smiled. "Lots of practice. And these." He pulled the custom leather gloves from his pocket. "I had these made to help with finger placement and to protect my hands without my coaches knowing why." Another hand went up. "Why keep it secret? For so long?" Michael thought for a moment before answering. "Basketball was my job, my public life. Music was something just for me, something that connected me to my grandmother. I didn't want it to become another performance, another thing people expected from Michael Jordan." In the back of the room, reporters were scribbling furiously. Tomorrow, this would be headline news across the country. Michael Jordan, basketball legend, secret piano virtuoso. A young girl, perhaps 12 years old, raised her hand shyly. When Deborah pointed to her, she stood up, looking nervous. "Mr. Jordan, I play piano too, but kids at school make fun of me because they say it's boring. What should I tell them?" Michael's expression softened. "Tell them that music is like having a superpower. You can create something beautiful out of nothing but air and emotion. That's pretty amazing." The girl beamed at his answer. As more hands went up, Michael noticed that Viktor Romanov had slipped out of his chair and was moving toward the exit. Without thinking, Michael said into the microphone, "Mr. Romanov, I'd love to hear your professional opinion." The room went completely silent. All heads turned toward Viktor, who froze mid-step, caught trying to escape. For a moment, it seemed he might ignore the invitation and keep walking. Instead, he turned slowly to face the stage. "My opinion?" Viktor said, his accent thicker than before. "What does my opinion matter now? You have charmed them all, Mr. Basketball Star." Deborah looked alarmed at his tone, But Michael remained calm. "I'd value your thoughts as a master pianist," Michael said sincerely. "I'm not trained the way you are." Victor's eyes narrowed, trying to detect mockery in Michael's words. Finding none, his shoulders relaxed slightly. "Your Chopin was acceptable," Victor admitted reluctantly. "Your left hand could use more independence in the middle section. But," he added, his voice softening almost against his will, "your own composition showed genuine feeling. It was impressive." Coming from Victor, this was high praise indeed. A murmur ran through the crowd. "Thank you," Michael said. "Maybe someday you could give me some pointers." Before Victor could respond, a heavy-set man in an expensive suit stood up. "Enough questions. What I want to know is, will you play something else for us, Mr. Jordan?" Calls of "yes" and "please" echoed around the ballroom. Even Victor, despite himself, looked interested in the answer. Michael glanced at his watch. It was getting late, but the energy in the room was electric. He thought of all the years he'd played alone in empty rooms and realized he was actually enjoying sharing his music with others. "One more," he agreed, returning to the piano bench. "Any requests?" Suggestions flew from all directions. "Mozart, Gershwin, jazz, something modern." Michael held up his hand for quiet. "I think I should play something challenging, since we have a piano master with us tonight." All eyes turned to Victor again. The pianist remained still, watching Michael with an unreadable expression. Michael flexed his fingers and then launched into Chopin's Revolutionary Etude, one of the most technically demanding pieces in the piano repertoire. The explosive, opening chords made several people jump in their seats. Victor's eyes widened in surprise. This was not an amateur's choice. This was a gauntlet being thrown down. Michael's hands flew across the keyboard, attacking the difficult runs and arpeggios. With precision and fire, the piece was a storm of emotion. Anger, defiance, hope, all expressed through a flurry of notes that required absolute control and skill. A professional cellist in the audience whispered to her companion, "He's actually doing it. He's playing it perfectly." In the middle of the room, Victor stood motionless, his expert ears catching every nuance of the performance. There was no denying the truth before him. The basketball player was playing one of the most difficult piano pieces in existence, and playing it well. Michael felt himself entering that special zone he knew from basketball, where time slowed down and everything became crystal clear. His fingers found each key without conscious thought. The music flowed through him, not from him. As he neared a particularly challenging passage, Michael looked up briefly. His eyes met Victor's across the room. Without breaking his rhythm, Michael executed the difficult section flawlessly, while maintaining eye contact with the master pianist. Victor was the first to look away. When the final thunderous chords of the piece rang out, the room exploded in the loudest applause yet. People stamped their feet and shouted in amazement. Deborah was crying openly now, not even trying to hide it. Michael stood, somewhat breathless from the emotional exertion. He bowed deeply to the audience, then turned and bowed specifically to Victor, a gesture of respect from one artist to another. Victor stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, he brought his hands together and applauded. It wasn't enthusiastic, but it was sincere, the acknowledgement of skill from a master. As Michael stepped down from the stage, he was immediately surrounded by admirers. Through the crowd, he saw Victor slip out a side door. The famous pianist had been upstaged, and everyone knew it. But strangely, Michael felt no triumph in that fact. Instead, he felt a curious sense of relief mixed with sadness. His secret was out now. The private world he'd built around his music would never be the same. A reporter pushed through the crowd, microphone extended. "Mr. Jordan, how does it feel to shock the world again?" Michael thought about his answer carefully. "It feels like coming home," he said at last, "like finally being completely myself in public." And in that moment, Michael realized something important. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. As guests crowded around him, asking questions and offering praise, Michael felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find Deborah, her face flushed with excitement. "Michael, the phones are ringing off the hook," she said. "Every news outlet in Chicago wants to talk to you. And we've received another $50,000 in donations since your performance." Michael smiled. At least his secret had helped the charity. "Not tonight," he said firmly. "No interviews yet. This was supposed to be about the kids, not me." Deborah nodded understanding. "Of course. But there's someone else who wants to speak with you." She leaned closer. "Victor is waiting in the small reception room behind the stage. He asked to see you privately." Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. He'd expected Victor to leave immediately after being upstaged. "I'll go talk to him," Michael said, curious about what the pianist wanted. As he made his way toward the back room, people patted his shoulders and shook his hand. Several serious-looking music lovers stopped him to discuss technical aspects of his playing. Michael answered politely, but kept moving. The reception room was small and elegantly furnished with plush chairs and a mahogany coffee table. Victor stood by the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. He didn't turn when Michael entered. "You wanted to see me?" Michael asked. Victor was silent for a moment before speaking. "In Russia, where I grew up, there is a saying, 'The bear you do not see is the one that will surprise you.'" He turned to face Michael. "You were my bear tonight, Mr. Jordan." Michael wasn't sure how to respond to that. "I wasn't trying to embarrass you." "But you did." Victor's voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. "I made a fool of myself." "You're still one of the greatest pianists in the world," Michael said. "Nothing that happened tonight changes that." Victor walked to a small piano in the corner of the room and ran his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them down. "How long?" he asked. "How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 10. About 30 years now." Victor nodded slowly. "And no one knew? No recordings? No performances?" "Just me and my teachers. And my grandmother, before she passed." "Why?" Victor seemed genuinely puzzled. "With your fame, you could have—" "That's exactly why," Michael interrupted. "Some things shouldn't be about fame." Victor considered this. "I would not understand that. For me, music has always been about being the best, being recognized." He paused. "Perhaps that is why you play with more heart than I do?" The admission clearly cost Victor some pride. Michael was touched by his honesty. "Your technique is still better than mine," Michael offered. Victor smiled slightly. "Yes, it is." Chariki. Tension in the room eased a bit. Victor sat down at the small piano and played a quick, complex run of notes. "Your left hand lacks independence in the middle section of the revolutionary etude," he said. "Try this." He demonstrated a different fingering for the challenging passage. Michael watched carefully, mentally noting the technique. "Like this?" Michael asked, taking Victor's place at the piano and trying the new approach. "Better," Victor said, "but your fourth finger needs to be stronger. Try again." For the next few minutes, The famous basketball player and the world-renowned pianist worked together on a small section of Chopin. It was a strange scene. The man who had mocked Michael hours earlier was now teaching him. Both of them focused entirely on the music. Finally, Victor nodded, satisfied. "Good. You learn quickly." "I had a good teacher when I was young," Michael said. Victor cleared his throat. "About what I said earlier. It was unprofessional and unkind. I apologize." Michael hadn't expected an apology. Apology accepted. A mischievous smile crossed Victor's face. "But I must say, if you ever get tired of being known as the greatest basketball player, you would only be an average concert pianist." Michael laughed. "I can live with that." A knock on the door interrupted. Them. Deborah peeked in, looking concerned. "Everything okay in here?" "We're fine," Michael assured her. "Just talking music." "Good, because there's something you should see," she said, opening the door wider. Michael and Victor followed her back to the ballroom, which was now half empty as the late hour had driven many guests home. But near the stage stood a small boy, maybe 9 or 10 years old, in a server's white jacket that was much too big for him. "That's Luis," Deborah explained quietly. "His mother works in the kitchen. He heard you play, and has been begging to meet you. He plays piano too." The boy looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot as Michael approached. "Hi, Luis," Michael said, kneeling down to the boy's level. "I hear you're a pianist." Luis nodded, shyly. "Yes, sir. My grandpa teaches me, but kids at school say piano is for sissies. They say I should play basketball instead." Michael smiled. "You know what? I play both. And let me tell you a secret. Piano is harder." Luis's eyes widened. "Really? Harder than basketball?" "Much harder," Michael confirmed. "It takes more practice and more patience." Victor stepped forward. "Your name is Luis? I started playing when I was your age, too." The boy looked from Michael to Victor, clearly star-struck to be talking to both men. "Would you like to play something for us, Luis?" Michael asked. Luis looked terrified. "Here? Now? Just us," Michael assured him. "No pressure." After some encouragement, Luis climbed onto the piano bench, his feet barely reaching the pedals. He played a simple Mozart piece, making a few mistakes, but pushing through with determination. When he finished, both Michael and Victor applauded. "Very good finger position," Victor said seriously, treating the boy like a real musician. "You have talent. Keep practicing, and don't worry about what other kids say," Michael added. "Do what you love." Luis beamed at them both before running back to his mother in the kitchen, eager to tell her about his impromptu performance. As they watched him go, Victor said quietly, "Perhaps we have inspired the next great pianist." "Or taught him that he doesn't have to choose between his passions," Michael replied. The three of them, the basketball legend, the master pianist, and the charity organizer, stood in comfortable silence, looking at the empty stage where so much had happened that night. "So what happens tomorrow?" Deborah finally asked. "When the whole world knows about Michael Jordan, the pianist?" Michael thought about it for a moment. "I guess I'll find out." But he already knew one thing for certain. Like his basketball career, his musical journey was about to take on a life of its own. And somehow, that felt exactly right. By the next morning, the story had spread like wildfire. Michael's phone wouldn't stop ringing. His assistant called to tell him that every talk show in America wanted to book him. Music magazines were requesting interviews. 3 major piano companies had already offered endorsement deals. Michael sat in his kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the morning news. There he was on the screen, playing the piano. Someone had recorded part of his performance on a phone, and shared it online. The clip had already been viewed millions of times overnight. The reporters were calling it The Secret Symphony of Michael Jordan and The Melody No One Knew. One headline read, Air Jordan soars on the keyboard. Michael turned off the TV and stared out the window. Part of him wished he could put his secret back in its box. For 30 years, music had been his private sanctuary. The one thing in his life that wasn't for public consumption. Now that was gone forever. His doorbell rang. Michael wasn't expecting anyone, and few people could get past the security gate without being announced. Curious, he went to answer it. Viktor Romanov stood on his doorstep, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Romanov," Michael said, surprised, "how did you find my address?" "I am famous too, you know," Viktor replied with a hint of his old arrogance. "People tell me things." Michael had to smile at that. "Come in." Viktor entered, looking around at Michael's home with interest. His eyes stopped on the corner of the living room, where a beautiful grand piano sat near the windows. "May I?" Viktor asked, gesturing toward it. Michael nodded. Viktor walked to the piano, examining it with an expert's eye. He ran his fingers across the keys, playing a quick scale. Steinway Model D. "Excellent choice," Viktor said approvingly. "How often do you play?" "Almost every day," Michael admitted. "It helps me relax." Viktor sat on the bench and played a short, complex piece that filled the room with sound. Even in this casual setting, his technical skill was astonishing. When he finished, he turned to Michael. "I came to make you an offer." "An offer?" Michael repeated. "I am planning a charity concert tour. 20 cities, with all proceeds going to music education for underprivileged children." Viktor paused. "I would like you to join me." Michael stared at him. "You want me to tour with you?" "As what? Your opening act?" "As my partner," Viktor corrected. "Equal billing. We would play some pieces together, some separately." Michael was speechless. Yesterday, this man had publicly mocked him. Today, he was proposing a tour together. "Why?" Michael finally asked. Viktor stood up from the piano bench and walked to the window. "Last night changed things. Not just for you, but for me as well." He turned to face Michael. "When you played your grandmother's composition, I remembered something I had forgotten." "What's that?" "Why I began playing in the first place." Viktor's voice softened. "It wasn't for fame or applause. It was because the music moved me. Somewhere, along the way, I lost that feeling." Michael understood. It was easy to lose yourself when the world was watching your every move. "Also," Viktor added, a smile tugging at his lips, "think how many tickets we would sell. The basketball superstar and the piano master, together on stage. People would pay a fortune, and all that money would help children learn music." Michael laughed. Viktor might have rediscovered his love of music, but he was still a pragmatist. "I don't know," Michael said honestly. "I've never played for large audiences. Last night was my first public performance since I was a kid." "You were not nervous," Viktor observed. "I watched you. You belong on the stage, whether with a basketball or at a piano." Michael walked to his piano and played a few notes of his grandmother's composition. The familiar melody brought back her smile, her patience, her belief in him. What would Grandma Eliza think about his music becoming public? Would she approve of him sharing their special connection with the world? Somehow, he knew she would. "Music heals the heart," she had told him. "When words fail you, music speaks." Maybe it was time for his music to speak to others, the way it had always spoken to him. "The tour would mean a lot of practice," Michael said, thinking out loud. "My technique isn't at your level." "I will help you," Victor said immediately. "We have 2 months before the first concert. With your natural talent and my teaching, you will be ready." It was strange to hear Viktor Romanov, who had mocked him just yesterday, now praising his natural talent. Life could change so quickly. "Let me think about it," Michael said. Victor nodded and reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out a business card and placed it on the piano. "1 week," he said. "Then I must find another partner if you decline." As Victor headed for the door, Michael called after him, "Why me? There are plenty of famous pianists who would tour with you." Victor paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Because when you play, people feel something. Even I felt it, and I did not want to." He smiled slightly. "Besides, no one would pay to see me perform with another classical pianist. But Michael Jordan, that is something new." After Victor left, Michael sat at his piano, thinking. His fingers moved automatically to his grandmother's composition, the piece he'd finished for her over 15 years. As he played, he could almost hear her voice. "Music is meant to be shared, Michael. That's how it lives forever." Michael took a deep breath and reached for his phone. It was time to call Deborah Winters. He had an idea for the Youth Basketball Foundation, one that would include music lessons alongside basketball training. His youth's secret was out now. It was time to make something good come from it. 1 week later, Michael sat in a small conference room at the Chicago Youth Basketball Foundation headquarters. Beside him was Deborah Winters, and across the table sat 5 serious-looking board members. "Let me get this straight," said the chairman, a gray-haired man named Walter Brooks. "You want to expand our foundation to include music education, basketball, and piano?" "Not just piano," Michael clarified. "All kinds of music. But yes, that's the idea." Walter frowned. "We've always been focused on sports. That's our mission." "Our mission is to help kids," Deborah said firmly. "Sports are just one way to do that." Michael leaned forward. "Think about it. There are kids out there like Luis, the boy we met at the charity event. He loves piano but gets teased about it. And there are kids who love basketball but maybe don't have the physical gifts to excel at it. Why choose?" Michael continued. "Why not give them both? Teamwork, discipline, creativity, expression. These are life skills kids can learn through both music and sports." Walter still looked unconvinced, but a younger board member named Tanya nodded enthusiastically. "I love this idea," she said. "It makes us unique among youth foundations. And with Michael Jordan as the face of both basketball and music programs, fundraising would be a breeze." Walter sighed. It would mean completely rebranding. New mission, statement, new programs, new staff. "I'm prepared to donate $1 million to kickstart the music program," Michael said quietly. The room went silent. Walter's eyebrows shot up. "1 million?" he repeated. Michael nodded. "And I'm planning to tour with Viktor Romanov. 20 cities, with all proceeds going to the foundation." Now everyone was staring at him. Even Deborah looked surprised. He hadn't told her about his decision to join Victor's tour. "So you accepted his offer," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "This morning," Michael confirmed. "We start rehearsals next week." Walter cleared his throat. "Well, that certainly changes things. With that kind of financial backing, we could create something truly special." "I have one condition," Michael said. "I want the program named after my grandmother, Eliza Jordan." She's the one who taught me that music and sports aren't as different as people think. They both require heart. Tanya was already making notes on her tablet. The Eliza Jordan Music and Basketball Program? I like it. We'll need to vote on this officially, Walter said, but his tone had changed. But speaking personally, I think it's an exciting direction. As the meeting continued, they discussed logistics, staffing needs, and potential locations for the Yehudi music classes. Michael found himself getting more excited with each detail they planned. This was bigger than basketball, bigger than his unexpected piano performance. This was about giving kids options he never had, the freedom to pursue multiple passions without choosing between them. After the meeting, Michael and Deborah walked out together. "Thank you for making this happen," he told her. "Me?" Deborah laughed. "You're the one donating $1 million and going on tour with the man who insulted you a week ago." "Speaking of Victor," Michael said, "he's giving a master class tomorrow at the Chicago Conservatory. He asked if I wanted to come watch." He paused. "Want to join me? Might be good research for our new program." Deborah agreed enthusiastically, and they made plans to meet the next day. When Michael arrived at the conservatory, he was surprised to find a crowd of reporters outside. Word had spread that he would be there. Cameras flashed as he made his way inside, where Deborah was waiting. "Sorry about the circus," he told her. "I guess I should have expected it. It's actually good publicity for the foundation," she said practically. "Come on, we don't want to be late." They slipped into the back of a performance hall where Victor was already working with a young pianist. About 50 music students watched, intently, as Victor corrected the teenager's hand position. "No, no," Victor was saying. "Your wrist must be more relaxed. Like this?" He demonstrated on his own hand. Michael watched with interest. Victor was strict, but not unkind. He clearly cared about helping the students improve. After working with 3 different pianists, Victor looked up at the audience. "We have a special guest with us today," he announced. "Michael Jordan, would you come up and share your perspective on practice and performance?" Michael hadn't expected to participate. He looked at Deborah, who gave him an encouraging nod. As he walked to the stage, the students whispered excitedly. Michael felt strangely nervous. He was used to speaking to athletes, not musicians. "What would you like me to talk about?" He asked Victor quietly. "Tell them about your grandmother," Victor suggested, "and how you kept playing all these years without anyone knowing." Michael turned to the eager young faces and began to speak. He told them about Grandma Eliza, about practicing in hotel rooms late at night, about finding peace at the piano when the pressure of basketball became too much. "Everyone sees the results," he said. "The slam dunks, the championships. No one sees the thousands of hours of practice. It's the same with music, isn't it? People hear the beautiful performance, but don't see the work behind it." The students nodded in understanding. One girl raised her hand. "Were you ever tempted to give up piano when basketball took off?" "Never," Michael said without hesitation. "Music was my balance, my private joy." He smiled. "Though I guess it's not private anymore." After answering more questions, Michael rejoined Deborah in the audience. Victor continued with his master class, occasionally glancing at Michael for confirmation when he made a point about practice or performance anxiety. It struck Michael as surreal, sitting in a music conservatory, being treated as an authority on piano. Just a week ago, no one in the music world had any idea he could play a note. As the class ended, a young boy approached Michael shyly. "Mr. Jordan, is it true you're going on tour with Mr. Romanoff?" Michael nodded. 20 cities. The boy's eyes widened. "I have posters of you dunking in my room." Now I'm going to practice piano extra hard." As the boy ran off to tell his friends, Deborah leaned over to Michael. "That's exactly why this matters," she said. "You've just made it cool for boys to play piano." Michael watched the excited students gathering around Victor for last-minute advice. He thought about his grandmother, about the 10-year-old boy he once was, ashamed to tell his friends he was taking piano lessons. "You know," he said to Deborah, "for the first time in my life, I feel completely myself in public. No more hiding parts of who I am." Deborah smiled. That might be the most important truth of all. 6 months later, the Chicago theater was packed to capacity. Every seat was filled for the final show of the Keys and Courts tour, featuring Michael Jordan and Viktor Romanov. What had started as an unlikely partnership had become the most talked-about musical event of the year. Backstage, Michael adjusted his bow tie, feeling the familiar pre-performance butterflies. Not stage fright exactly. After years of playing basketball in front of thousands, he was used to crowds, but the good kind of nerves that kept him sharp. "Ready?" Victor asked, appearing at his side. "As I'll ever be," Michael replied. Victor nodded approvingly. "Your playing has improved. The work we did on the Rachmaninoff yesterday was good." Coming from Victor, this was high praise. The past 6 months of touring and practicing together had forged an unlikely friendship between them. Victor was still demanding and sometimes prickly, but he had become a genuine mentor to Michael, pushing him to improve in ways his previous teachers never had. "Thanks," Michael said. "It helps having someone to practice with who's better than me. Keeps me hungry." Victor's lips twitched in a small smile. "Like basketball, always competing." A stagehand appeared. "5 minutes, gentlemen." As the stagehand left, Victor turned serious. "Before we go on, I must tell you something, Michael." "What's that?" "When we met at that charity event, I was not in a good place. My career was successful, yes, but I had lost my passion for music. It had become just technique, just showing off." Victor looked down at his hands. "You reminded me what it means to play from the heart." Michael was touched by the confession. "And you pushed me to be technically better. I guess we helped each other." "A fair trade," Victor agreed, extending his hand. They shook hands just as the stage manager called, "Places, please." The audience applauded as Michael and Victor walked onto the stage. 2 grand pianos stood side by side, their lids raised to project the sound. Michael took his seat at one, Victor at the other. They began with Bach, played as a duet. Michael had struggled with this piece during rehearsals, but tonight his fingers found every note perfectly. He and Victor moved as one, their music intertwining. As at twines they played, Michael glanced into the audience. In the front row sat Deborah Winters beside Luis, the boy from the kitchen whose mother worked at the hotel. Luis was now one of the first students in the Eliza Jordan music and basketball program, excelling at both piano and point guard. When the Bach ended, the audience erupted in applause. Michael and Victor stood and bowed together. And now, Victor announced, Michael Jordan will perform a solo piece, one that holds special meaning for him. This was not on the program. Michael looked at Victor in surprise. Victor leaned close and whispered, "Play your grandmother's composition, the full version." "But we haven't rehearsed that for the show," Michael whispered back. "Some music needs no rehearsal," Victor replied. "It comes from here." He pointed to his heart. Michael hesitated, then sat back down at the piano. This piece had always been private, something just between him and Grandma Eliza. He had played portions of it that night at the charity event, but never the complete composition as he had finished it. This piece, Michael explained to the audience, was started by my grandmother, Eliza Jordan. She began writing it before she passed away. Over the past 15 years, I've been working to complete it. He placed his hands on the keys and began to play. The melody started simple and sweet, the part his grandmother had written. It spoke of childhood, of learning, of love passed from one generation to the next. Then the music shifted to the sections Michael had composed. More complex, with hints of struggle, determination, and finally, triumph. It told the story of his life, of basketball glory and private musical passion. As he played the final notes, Michael realized he had tears in his eyes. He rarely cried, but sharing this most personal piece with the world felt like the completion of a promise made long ago. The audience sat in stunned silence for a moment before rising in a standing ovation. Victor, standing to the side, nodded with respect, and what might have been a sheen of tears in his own eyes. After taking his bow, Michael returned to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said. "The money raised from this tour has helped launch music programs in youth centers across America, including our Eliza Jordan music and basketball program in Chicago." The applause grew louder. "I've been known as a lot of things in my life," Michael too continued. "A basketball player, a businessman, and now, I guess, a pianist. But there's one more thing I'd like to share with you tonight." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the last page of his grandmother's unfinished composition, with her handwritten note. "For Michael, finish our song one day." But there was more to the note, a part he had never shared with anyone. Michael read it aloud. "Music is the key that opens doors we didn't know were locked. When you finish our song, promise me one thing. Use your music to open doors for others." Michael looked up at the audience. "That's the promise I've been keeping. Not just finishing her song, but using it to open doors for kids who might not otherwise have the chance to discover music or sports or whatever lights them up inside." He carefully folded the paper and returned it to his pocket. We all have secret talents, hidden parts of ourselves. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is to share those secrets with the world. As Michael and Victor played their final duet of the evening, Michael felt a sense of completion. His grandmother's lesson had come full circle. He had not only finished their song but had used it to create something lasting, something that would open doors for generations to come. And that was a secret worth sharing. That's the end of our story. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Where are you listening from? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this tale, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Your support gives me the motivation to create more stories like this one.